Hi, everybody. We're back today. It's me, Valerie Monroe, and me, Bookwormy. We're back inside because it's not so nice out today, but we'd like to read a little bit more with you of, would you like to say it? Journey to Nagwanis. And things were getting really interesting. That's right. If you remember yesterday, Brogdon and Finley and Shay were getting nearer to the entrance to the tunnel to Nagwanis. They could feel that cool air coming up from the ground, but they were being pelted by rocks. They were hearing all these screaming sounds, these unusual sounds. And then Brogdon saw Finley's cap lying on the ground. And if you remember, there were these huge footprints next to his cap. I wonder who's been there with them. Chapter 10. Shay proves to be a courageous hero. The footprints were long and wide. I mean, you may be thinking to yourself, who can make a footprint like that? After glancing around to be sure he wasn't going to be attacked, Brogdon laid down inside one. They were at least 4 or 5 inches to spare above his head. He could easily extend his arms fully and not even touch the sides. And we know Brogdon is 12 inches, right? He's a foot, so the footprint is longer than a foot and wide, pretty wide. It was unlike any footprint of any Lake Wahakmo creature that he knew of. It belonged to neither bear, nor deer, nor bobcat. So what creature made these, he wondered uneasily. He thought back to his conversation with the rabbits. They had said that Finley had been trying to escape from a troll when he had dropped into the burrow. Could the same troll have carried Finley off now? Brogdon surely hoped not. He couldn't stand trolls. They were ugly, not particularly smart, and above all, ruthless thieves. Aunt Gladys was always saying, "Batten down the hatches," when a troll was in the area. Trolls had stolen her pies and freshly baked breads that were cooling on the windowsill. Trolls had stolen from their stores of nuts and berries. The thought of the amber rose falling into a troll's hand caused Brogdon to ignore the pain he was in, the blood that was still dripping, and the huge headache that had blossomed. He sat up, retrieved Finley's cap from the ground, and used at it to dab at the blood. Remember, he'd been hit in the head. "Shay," Brogdon called out, "I need your help." He hoped that the parrot had not flown away. He knew that he could not search for Finley on his own. Shay arrived and extended his wing around Brogdon, who could tell that the parrot was worried about him. The bird's eyes kept darting from the blood to the footprint, unsure of what to do. "Shay," Brogdon muttered through clenched teeth, it seems like our good friend Finley has been taken by a nasty troll." "Nasty troll," repeated Shay. "And although at the moment I'm feeling quite unwell, there isn't anyone else who can rescue him," confided Brogdon. "Rescue him?" repeated Shay. "Yes, before I pass out. We must be off," stated Brogdon. "Be off!" Shay shouted. "Be off! Be off! Be off!" Shay's warrior cry roused Brogdon to battle. He pushed aside his pain and forgot how nasty and dangerous it would be to confront a troll. Time was ticking away. With Shay at his side and Finley's cap in his hand, Brogdon followed the humongous footprints. They wound in and out of the boulders like angry snakes. Sorry, it says like hungry snakes. And Brogdon had to fight off a fresh feeling of dread each time he spotted another footprint. But he would not turn back. Shay patted him on his shoulder with his wing, which Brogdon found very comforting. He followed the prints until the trail ended. The last of them stopped next to the largest of the boulders. Brogdon felt a current of cool air near his feet. It seemed to be coming from the other side of the massive rock. He realized he was now just a few feet from the entrance to Nagwanis, and that's where they wanted to deliver the treasure. Just as he began to venture around to the other side of the boulder, he thought he heard the same grunting sound again. Even worse were the muffled squeaks, as if someone was trying to call out for help. Brogdon flattened himself against the boulder and began slowly tiptoeing around it. He took a deep breath and silently counted backwards from 10. By the time he got to 6, he gained another dose of fearlessness from Che, who was still next to him and waiting bravely for the next move. He then surprised himself by rounding the boulder, ready and determined to face the troll. But there was no troll on the other side. But there was something close. Sitting next to a hole in the ground was the hairiest man Brogdon had ever seen. And he was holding Finley in his enormous hairy hand, stifling the gnome's cries for help. Brogdon stared in amazement. He had never seen a creature like this in his life. His face looked like an ape's. And even though the man was sitting down, Brogdon could see that he was probably as tall as an old tree. His reddish-brown hairiness covered his entire body, and he had reddish eyes to match. His arms were very long, and the one that was not holding Finley at his side, his mammoth feet, were undoubtedly the source of the prints that they had followed. While Brogdon was taking inventory of every detail of the giant creature's body so that he could describe it later to Aunt Hazel, Che sprang into action, flying straight at the hairy beast. He pecked away at its hands, using his beak like a jackhammer, until the creature loosened his grip on Finley. The gnome dropped to the ground and then ran to hide behind Brogdon. The hairy man looked accusingly at Brogdon, who felt a shiver of fear run down his spine. Aunt Gladys always told him that in an emergency, it was critically important to remain calm. Take a moment to think before you act, she advised. That way you avoid turning a bad situation into an even worse situation. Well, the hairy man let out an ear-splitting shriek of anger, and Brogdon realized the time had come to decide on a plan. And fast. Running away was definitely not an option. With one stride, the creature could match his. And then it would only be a matter of time before... Well, he shoved that image out of his mind as soon as it entered. "What do we do, Brogdon?" Finley shouted. "What do we do?" Brogdon tried to think, but it was as if his brain was frozen. He could not tear his gaze away from Che, who was now pecking at the hairy man's eyes and the top of his head. The hairy man waved his arms wildly and swatted at Che like he was a mosquito, but it was to no avail. "If Che can keep that pecking up for just a few seconds," Brogdon whispered to Finley, "I think we can dive into the hole." "And what about Che?" "Well, Che has wings. He can fly to safety. Now, on my count," Brogdon said. 1, 2, 3. However, neither Brogdon nor Finley ran on 3, because 2 long arrows came whizzing out of nowhere at that moment. Whoa. One landed in the hairy man's arm, and the other lodged itself in his leg. He fell back with a thud onto the ground, howling in pain. "What in the..." gasped Finley. "Never mind," screamed Brogdon. "Just run." They took off for the hole that was just merely inches away from the hairy man's body. He did not even glance their way. His painful howls echoed through the air as he tried to pry loose the arrow that was stuck in his arm. It wasn't until they had entered the dark hole and were descending a narrow, slippery stone staircase that Brogdon realized Che had not followed them. He gave one backward glance and hoped more than anything that Che had flown away to safety. And that's where we'll end today in Journey to Nagwanis. What did you think? Oh, that hairy man seems kind of scary, and I hope Che is okay. And I don't know where that arrow came from. 2 arrows that hit the hairy man. That was a crazy chapter. Well, anyway, it sounds like they're descending down this staircase, starting to go to Nagwanis. Please join us tomorrow so we can see what happens. Absolutely. Join us tomorrow. We'll see you.